Nick, when I want to try to understand something, I look to see if there's a philosophy of. It's a way of thinking that I really enjoy. Philosophy of science, mathematics, education, certainly philosophy of religion, which you've been one of the leading proponents, philosophy of mind. I once tried to write a philosophy of investment banking, of all things. So in trying
Did it work?
Well, I mean, I thought it did. I don't think it shook the world.
Okay.
And as I've been trying to understand the arts, particularly in terms of the art-seeking understanding, aesthetic cognitivism, the conference that we're here in Grand Rapids, and Frank Lloyd Wright House here in Grand Rapids, I want to try to discern the philosophy of the arts. How can a philosophical approach discern the essence of art or discern the categories of art?
So let me talk a little bit first about the history of philosophy of art. Philosophy of art goes back to the ancient Greeks. Plato talks rather negatively about art in most places. Aristotle has a much more positive take on poetry in his book Poetics. So there have been philosophical reflections on the arts throughout the ages. The subject changed drastically in the late 18th century. I think it changed because of changes in the arts themselves. In the bourgeois middle-class West, people began to prize works of art more and more as objects for listening, careful looking, careful reading, and so forth. Whereas previously, works of art were in religious contexts. There were sculptures up in the cathedrals and on the campani of cathedrals and so forth. So what we call aesthetics was born, prizing the visual, auditory qualities of art. And so philosophy of art became, for 2.5 centuries, let's say, basically aesthetics, on the aesthetic qualities of art. And beauty was thought to be one of these, obviously, aesthetic qualities. Before the 18th century, there was no particular connection by philosophers between beauty and art. Beauty was thought to be in nature and plants and animals and works of art also. So as I say, in the modern period, philosophy of art basically became philosophy of aesthetics. Now I'm going to give a little anecdote to explain why I became dissatisfied with that. A fine philosopher of art, Monroe Beardsley, spent his career teaching at Temple, has had a wonderful book, Aesthetics. And when I began teaching philosophy of art aesthetics at Calvin College in the 70s, I used Beardsley's book. And Beardsley's book is all about the aesthetic approach to art and how we need leisure you need extra time if you're going to go to concerts, right, and to museum and so forth. So I'm sitting in my living room on a Saturday afternoon in Grand Rapids listening to the University of Michigan radio station. Normally it's classical music. U of M station has become a talk radio, which I greatly resent. But in those days, a lot of classical music. On this Saturday afternoon, the announcer said, "Today we're going to do something different. We're going to play work songs. So he plays work songs. For 15, 20 minutes, I'm fascinated by the aesthetic qualities of these. Wonderful. And then suddenly a dissonant thought occurs to me. I say, work songs. These originated as accompaniments to work, manual labor. And I'm sitting here in my living room treating them as aesthetic objects. There's something here that I've got to think about. For many years, I had no idea what to think about it. Is this bad art? Is that why we philosophers pay no attention to it? I thought it was really nice aesthetically, and obviously the people who sang these songs while working thought they were good, right? So finally, the conclusion to which I came was this: we philosophers have to broaden our perspective. We human beings engage works of the arts in all kinds of different ways. One very important way is the aesthetic way, aesthetic contemplation. I don't want to demean that. But they're work songs and the Byzantine icons, which the people kiss and so forth. So I wrote a book, Art in Action, in which I tried to make the case that we philosophers should expand our vision and reflect on them, not just on high art, aesthetic art, but all the ways in which we human beings engage the arts. I preached that, but didn't do it. So I could be accused of more or less carrying on the tradition, right? So finding in a book that I published in the about 2007, as I recall, Art Rethought.
Oh.
I actually tried to do it. So I talked about memorial art, art in which we try to keep alive and honor the memory of somebody or some event, art for veneration, social protest art. I took Uncle Tom's Cabin, which is viewed by most people who care about aesthetics as poorly constructed and so forth. But it was probably the most influential novel that's ever been written in English. So you can't just dismiss it. And then I had two chapters on work songs. I was very hesitant because I don't sing work songs. But I said, this is where it began. I've got to talk about work songs. So I did, and some people have told me that they think it's the best chapter in the book.
And so what give me some sense of those chapters. What are some of the analysis?
So what I argued was that in the case of work songs, there's a new creation that takes place. There's a blend between the work and its rhythmic qualities and so forth, and the music. So it's not just music, and it's not just work, but while they're singing these songs, there's a new music-work or work-music.
It's a new substance that's emerged in reality.
Yeah, something new. It's a creative enterprise.
Did you see some of the work songs having some kind of a syncopated relationship to the physical kind of work that was being done?
Yes. So there are some wonderful recordings by father and son Lomax, who in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s went around recording not just concert hall work songs, but in the workplaces. And there's one especially that I found really striking. It's a railroad worker singing a song. And the bang of the hammers on the spikes becomes a percussion instrument. It's just instead of drums, we boom, boom, bang, bang.
And it flows into the music.
Yeah. So one of the Lomax father-son asks one of the people why they sing these work songs. The answer he gives is, I think, just wonderful. Because it makes the work go so much better.
That is wonderful. Yeah.
The grammar's a little bit...
it's perfect.
It make the work go so better.
That's an exact quote.
That's an exact quote.
Wow. And so as you reflect back...
Oh, and let me say one more thing. And so when they talk about it, they feel liberated when they're singing these songs. They're oppressed. Many of them were recorded by Lomax in prisons, and they're shuffled around and so forth. But now, often their supervisors don't like them to sing these songs. They try to stop them from singing them. But this is the very singing while they're working the creativity in it is an act of protest. Wonderful.
And so how do you reflect?
Oh yeah. So what was your original?
So how do you reflect back on the development of philosophy of the arts, given your broadening of the whole category?
So what's happening in recent years is this. First, there have been a number of philosophy of art colleagues of mine who've been expanding our understanding of museum paintings, concert hall music, and so forth, who've been arguing that these are not just objects for aesthetic contemplation, but they shape goes back to what we were speaking, shape our understanding. They've got cognitive significance. And a number of others are beginning to sort of come along with me and say, let's not just expand our understanding of concert hall music and museum visual art, but let's go beyond the museums and let's go beyond the concert halls to look at work situations and memorial art. Belfast is a treasure of memorial art, polemical memorial art. If you go to Belfast, what you'll find is they're beginning to fade now, but the Protestants had their memorial art celebrating their big important figures, and the Catholics had their memorial art. Sometimes we're facing each other on the same street. So this is polemical memorial art, but it's memorial art, keeping alive the memory and keeping up spirits and so forth.